Call this park board meeting to order. We'll start with roll call. Brittany.
Miller,
Here.
Rushmeyer, Schaefer,
Yes.
Yeager,
Yes.
Scheib.
Here. Next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. I will note page 23 for item 6A has been amended. So if anyone on the board was curious about that, wanted to present that before we discuss the approval of the agenda. Brent's got it pulled up, or we'll have it pulled up.
It must be the printed version. There we go. I think the one in the packet is the one.
The older one.
Yeah, so she's passing around the printed one. Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, if you have a chance to read, look for some kind of motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second the motion to approve the agenda.
Any further discussion on the agenda? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent calendar. Notice to the public, all matters listed are considered routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the board votes on the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Seconded.
Any further discussion on the consent calendar? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent calendar is approved. Next, we have new business. I'll invite Sergeant Thiesing up.
Good afternoon.
Before you start, just make sure there's a green light. Kind of perfect. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Sergeant Brad Thiesing with the Crown County Sheriff's Office. I head up our Boat and Water Recreation Division. I reached out to the Parks Board, just looking to open some discussion related to the ski loons and the conduct that takes place out there. This has been an ongoing issue between the Parks Board, or excuse me, with the ski loons and some of the residents that are near the park where their activities take place. The Sheriff's Office involvement has picked up, or we have become more involved with the activities that take place on Rice Lake. And as the Sheriff's Office gets further up to speed with what's been going on out there, this sounds like this has been something that's been ongoing for quite some time. The ski loons have been practicing out there for several years, and the Sheriff's Office has not really been that involved with any of the activities that take place. So as far as what's going on out there, and just wanted to clear up a couple points, and specifically to touch on the contract that the city would have with the ski loons, or the Parks Board would have with the ski loons, and the ability to govern conduct. So the agreement that the Parks Board would enter into, and that ability to govern their conduct out there on the water. So basically, from the Sheriff's Office perspective, the ski loons activities are a sanctioned event, almost sanctioned with, in combination with the Parks Board and the ski loons, and those activities, not just the activities that take place on the park, but out there on the water, can be governed by the board and what's considered reasonable or acceptable conduct. So I'm not sure if I'm making myself real clear on that aspect, but I've come across multiple communications where there's been comments where the park board or the city of Brainerd doesn't have the ability to regulate what the conduct that's taking place on the water. But because there is that rental agreement for the riparian zone space to be able to put their dock in and the ski jump, there can be some additional language added to that agreement that would also allow the Parks Board the ability to govern the conduct. From the Sheriff's Office's perspective, what really comes into question was considered acceptable conduct and a reasonable impact to the residents in that area. So, and to also clarify, the ski loons, they did express concern about having restrictions placed on their conduct while they're out there, different than any other individuals using the public waters. Because the ski loons host exhibitions and put on shows, they're no longer considered recreational water skiers, and that subjects them to additional restrictions, specifically from the sheriff's office as far as having to apply for a permit to host their events. Their practices they don't fall under that same umbrella, but the impact that their practices would have would play into whether or not the sheriff's office would either approve or deny those permits. So again, that takes them from a normal recreational water skier category into a separate category as far as the exhibition aspect of things. I guess just touch base on the ski jump. Again, their conduct and the impact of their conduct that has on to the general public, good or bad. That's obviously a very good thing for members of the community to be able to get out there and water ski. But again, overall, that umbrella, working with the Parks Board would have the ability to regulate how the ski jump is placed, the impact that it's having on the neighboring residents. Again, if they enter into that rental agreement of the riparian zone, whether in the Monterey Valley, whether it was $1 or whatever that amount can be, the languages in the rental agreement can also include that regulation of conduct out there on the water. Okay, and then so basically it doesn't come into question whether or not there is an impact on the residents. So there is an impact. Basically what it comes down to is how significant that impact is, both the good and the bad. And basically nothing takes place without a cost. So whether it's the benefits to the neighbor, the community in general, and giving people the opportunity to get out there and water ski, but there's going to be a cost. And right now it's my impression that cost is kind of being focused on those immediate residents there. That impact, again, is subjective. What's considered acceptable and reasonable impact on them. This is a little something different than some of the different events because it's an ongoing event with the multiple night practices and then the scheduled events. So again, that impact is not just like a one-time thing where it's at over multiple days throughout the summer. So that all plays into taking consideration what can be considered as acceptable conduct. If it's just a one-time event, that conduct has a lot less impact because again, it's a short duration of time. But if it's going to be on a nightly basis, that impact is again focused more intently on those residents there. Because that was the main talking points I wanted to bring up is just the Parks Board ability to regulate conduct, and there's already a process in place to address complaints coming in from the public, and the Sheriff's Office would like to be able to step in and help determine what would be considered reasonable conduct when as we work together to try to figure out what that conduct would be.
Great.
All right. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, any questions on the board? Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for being here. Greatly appreciate it. I have just a couple of questions. So it says that the loons reached out to the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Department, but what was the impetus for you to actually be here? How did you get here? Did somebody ask you to be here from either party? Was your idea? How did you get here?
So ultimately, wanted to touch base with the Parks Board. Was reviewing communications. We're just and even working with the ski loons, there's just some communications, some misconceptions, and I wanted to just basically establish a starting point so that all parties involved are kind of on the same page.
Got it. I'm going to try it one more time. Who asked you to be here, or did you come on your own?
Came on my own.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
So second follow-up question is, so you're familiar with the ski loons and what's been going on over the years. Would it be fair to say that there has been an escalation of squabbling between the two groups over the past years? Has that escalated, in your opinion, over the past few years to greater extremities? Conduct on the water, phone calls, that type of thing?
Based on the Sheriff's Office's involvement, I would say things have escalated to the point where the Sheriff's Office is getting involved.
Okay.
I don't know if that's specifically just because we are now receiving those complaints. The Sheriff's Office hasn't received a lot of complaints to their normal means of reporting. Some of them have been coming in from direct reports to the sheriff. There was some conduct as far as boats and whatnot that were being placed out there. Again, so that's, some of that was just direct reports to us. They haven't been coming in through our typical reporting through calling the sheriff's office main report line or the 911 thing along those lines.
Got it. And has any of these inquiries, has any of these phone calls or any of the verbiage that's gone back and forth had anything to do with safety or conduct on the water pertaining to safety of either party?
They would pose, some of the conduct that was taking place would pose potential safety concerns.
Thank you. And just one last question here. If there were no contract in place between the ski loons and the park board, we would have no control over what they do on the lake.
If there
They
was,
would be like any other party. They could enter, egress the park like anyone else, hypothetically through a special event or something like that. Our parks open at 10 and close at 10. But if we had no contract with this organization, the ski loons would be operating in 100% independently, and their conduct on the water would have nothing to do with the park board or the city of Brainerd.
and so the conduct of the ski loons on the water, if they were operating independently of the park, so if they were leaving from a private residence or something along those lines, we would address it with the residence owner specifically, and then we'd take in consideration potential, if an agreement wasn't able to be attained, the sanctions as far as the events and the jump itself, the water structure.
But what I'm driving at here is that the basic mechanism that I'm hearing that's connecting the park board to the conduct on the water is that contract that we sign, which puts both parties into a working, some type of a working agreement, correct?
Correct.
That's it. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So I have a few questions too, and one is, what's your opinion on what's going on the lake?
Well, it's very
What
complicated.
are you seeing,
Yeah.
I mean, so from the residents' point of view, you said there's, somebody's paying the price,
Right.
somebody's which, yes, there's always give and take, but,
Yeah. So I think there is a direct impact to the immediate residents, and I think there is room for improvement. I've addressed some conduct out there that would, with the ski loons, just as far as some of their boat activity, and we placed some buffers out there. So I think there is room for improvement, and I think there is room for neutral ground. I believe both parties that are involved are fairly far apart on what they would agree to be acceptable. But the conduct, I think, can be regulated reasonably, and they should be able to reasonably practice down there with some restraints, not that other regular boaters wouldn't be subject to, just because of, I guess, the intense use of that area. It's a very focused, intense use. Your standard recreational boater does not involve the frequency of boat traffic or the number of skiers on the.
so I received an email, I think it was Wayne, had sent to Jesse Dean and myself. And in that email, it also talked about some of the worst shore degradation, erosion that's been seen in comparison to other lakes. Do you have any opinions on that?
So I guess it doesn't come into question whether or not wave action causes erosion. It's just, the extent that it does cause, which is debatable. And I guess I wouldn't be able to testify or speak to the extent versus that caused from a storm, other than the fact there is an increase in erosion because of the intense boat traffic, but to what extent I can't say.
Sure. To me, I think it's encouraging you bring something to light that, if it's true that the park board, if we're entering into a contract with them, that gives us more regulation of what's going on in the lake. I think that's quite interesting. And personally, I feel for the residents of the lake. Two things. I love the Ski Loons organization. I love what they're doing for the kids and for the community. But I also understand where the residents are coming from, and that's got to be difficult. And it's all summer long, and so I see both sides. And I know in the past, there's been some, well, there's a contract, but I'm gonna do this anyway, or I'm gonna do this anyway, and there's kind of been some back and forth, but, I mean, if that's true, and the city were to have the city attorney look at this and say, yep, our contract could extend further than just the shoreline, I think if we're gonna sanction, an organization, and I'm talking to the board as well, if we're gonna sanction an organization, then, if there's some ill to be got by what's going on with these functions, then I think it's imperative that we look hard at that. For the next year, we're almost through this year, and I also seen something about another, an extra date to practice beyond the contract. And again, we have a contract, is there another lake? I think we need to look hard at, maybe the ski loons need to raise some money and build another ramp and start spreading their practices to more than just one lake. But that's just my opinion, because if I lived on the lake, I can see where I would be in the same boat. And probably a number of the members of the ski loons live on a lake, and if my thought is, if things were turned around, it was them, that they'd probably have some of the same complaints that the residents of Rice Lake are having. But and then one last thing, according to the safety thing, are you seeing that kind of action, potential safety issues on both ends of this, or on one more than the other?
I would say that, well, it's a good question. Basically, some of the actions from one will have an impact on the safety aspect of the other. So whether it's a structure that's placed in a certain area or a boat that's placed in a certain area, if the structures continue to be used as it's designed and there's boats placed there, well, continue to use that structure, then that would be the boat operators or the skiers that will be creating that danger. But by placing the boat in there, that's also creating a danger for the skiers. So I would say it's kind of mutual when things like that happen. It kind of brings things to a screeching halt, and then they have to be specifically addressed for the conduct or for anything, activities to continue to go on. So to say one's more than the other, I wouldn't put a number or draw a hard line in the sand yet at that point.
And then one more question, you had mentioned that because they're an organization and they're sanctioned, does that give the sheriff's department more enforcement abilities in what's going on there, regardless of the contract between the city and the?
So from the sheriff's office perspective, yeah, we would look at it as the big picture, and we would look at specifically the sanctioned events, and would be their shows or their exhibitions that they would put on. We could sanction those, and we could also sanction the ski jump specifically. But as far as the conduct, if it was being done in a manner which is safe, the dock itself would still be able to be allowed to be done there. And if their practices were continued, the sheriff's office, as long as they were done safely, wouldn't be able to impose sanctions on that. So the sanctions would be imposed working with the ski loons, hopefully to change their behavior or their conduct. And but again, that's where the things could be really, you're kind of walking that line, what's acceptable conduct and what's an acceptable impact. So. Yep.
Appreciate it.
I have something to say. So, thanks for being here. It helps a lot to hear from you. I am disappointed that this is the first time that we've heard from you. I guess I was always told that that we can't control the water, but I guess, I don't know no one controls the water then. So it's a bummer that the last 4 or 5 years we've been going around the same discussion. So hopefully this can move us forward. And it would just be great to have your partnership in this, because I think we need that. We need that support to know what's good and what we can say yes and no to, so.
And I guess kind of coming back to Mr. Yeager's earlier question about reaching out, I guess I was originally under impression this would be a little bit more of an informal meeting as opposed to an open board meeting. So.
This is a very serious issue. So, thank you.
Dave?
So I just had 2 questions. So if we weren't to have a contract on our end, would you then be putting restrictions on them based off of just the usage? Because you basically said, based off their usage, that puts them in a different category. So let's remove us from the situation. If we, at some point, said, we're done with the contract, does that then fall into your court in terms of putting restrictions on terms of what they can and can't do and of?
So if you guys terminated your contract, the ski jump would have to find a different riparian zone to be placed in, and in addition to the dock. If it was placed in a private person's riparian zone, then the sheriff's office would regulate that conduct and whether or not to sanction any of those permits for the event permits. And again, would take into consideration the current things that, as far as as far as the events, the intensity of use. If it's typically a private person and if it's on their own private shoreline, there's, again, potential for complaints from the existing neighbors. And whether or not we would continue to issue permits for the events themselves, and whether or not we would issue permits for the structure itself based on their conduct.
So the jump is also paired to us as well? It's paired to the usage of our property?
Correct, because the water structures are supposed to be placed within the riparian zone, and then the ski loons rent that riparian zone as part of their contract through you
Yeah,
guys.
I'll echo Kara's sentiment that that's not what I believe anyone on this board has heard over the last handful of years. So that's an interesting statement. I'm glad that you've come and said that. Do you ever see there being a point where the sheriff office would step in and say, what you've done here with your contract is not meeting the needs of that area?
There's always, I guess, that potential that depending on what conduct's allowed to take place, I don't want to say we would never get involved. For the most part, we would prefer to stay as an advisory and give some direction on that aspect of what we believe is acceptable conduct, and just based on our knowledge of the different things related to the water.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming in, and I understand that, us in our granite palace up here makes things a lot more, intense than they often need to be. But the conversation needs to happen because, like I said, I don't think that some of these comments have ever been heard by this park board, at least not in my time being here.
Never heard this.
So, yeah, thank you.
I speak for myself, I haven't.
And so I had one more point, I guess. I had been reaching out and working with Chris Dens, and we talked about some different changes to conduct, and even as we're talking about these things, from his perspective, he expressed concern how he would be potentially regulated by the Parks Board, and then the Sheriff's Office would come in again and make additional restrictions and regulations. And realistically, from our perspective, it would make more sense to pull things down to one unit that's governing how things are taking place, and their conduct out there, kind of basically at a base level.
So you guys want to take this over then?
He is
But from
never
our
coming to
perspective,
a
we
park.
would
This
immediately-
guy will never come to a park board meeting ever again. Ever again.
I just had a couple more questions for you. Keep
Yes.
you on the hot seat here. So if I'm reading between the lines of what you've said about boats being parked near structures, that to me reads like there are private boats parked very close to the jump.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And those are,
So-
yes, sure. So you mentioned kind of acceptable behaviors. Is that like in state law? Is that in county regulations? Kind of as we look at, right, okay, we can regulate this, where would we pull kind of that in, other than bringing you back here?
Yeah.
Less.
So
Yeah.
the DNR does a real good job of being even more vague than I am. Their regulation I would say it provides general guidance. So there's general guidance on what's considered acceptable water skiing behavior. But now you couple that with the intensity and the multiple people taking part in that activity in a focused location, that also has an impact on that. So what would be considered acceptable water ski behavior, again, for that just recreational water skier, would not be the same for the club or an organization that's has that intense practices and events. So
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you. So you mentioned you can issue permits or sanction, right, their shows and exhibitions. If the loons were just to purely practice at Lum Park, it seems like there's sort of nothing you would be able to do enforcement-wise?
So our enforcement, if they were just strictly going to practice, we could still observe there's unsafe conduct, but if the conduct's being done safely, our involvement is limited there. Would fall back down to the ski jump. If the ski jump became a mute issue, again, then all our main focus would be just strictly on the safety aspect of things, which, you know, obviously, again, there's still that impact to the residents there, where that falls back to that rental agreement. And
Perfect, thank you. So again, right, if we look at, right, being able to regulate some of the activities, would enforcement, right, that kind of happens on y'all, right? Like, if we say you can't do X and then X happens, obviously the park board is
Right.
not a regulatory body.
Right, so if there was, basically, if the agreement was violated and this was taking place, X was taking place and it wasn't agreed upon, it would be basically a civil termination of the rental agreement, and then they would lose their ability to have the jump there based on the original agreement. Or the jump in the dock and the riparian lease.
Excellent. Cool, that was everything I had for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I did have one additional question, maybe for Jennifer and or Jesse. Given that it sounds like the jump being in our water means that we have some regulatory authority, I'm maybe now a little worried that we also have liability if something goes wrong. So if we could maybe, if you know off the top of your head, or if we could have Joe weigh in on that. I would maybe want to know
That would be something that I would want the attorney to weigh in on.
I think Brad can weigh in on it, because I have a trampoline that's under the same stipulation.
Yeah.
So is my understanding the ski loons are required to maintain an insurance policy, is that correct? So this, the permit is issued to the ski loons because it's for the ski jump, because it's their ski jump, they're renting the riparian zone from you guys. So it's my understanding, attorneys may have a different perspective on it, but it's my understanding, the liability would fall with the ski loons as far as the liability from the ski jump. And based on just a brief read of your guys' agreement that they maintain that liability insurance.
Perfect, thank you. Discussion from the board. Takeaways, things you want to think about? Kevin?
I'll just say, the contract is coming up, next year is hypothetically that. So this was very eye-opening. My personal leaning is now is not necessarily the time to dig into, what we might do next year, but this is absolutely eye-opening here, and I'll be very much looking forward to next time this comes up for us. So, yeah. But thanks to everyone who came, for sure.
You're really not going to let any other residents talk? Just for briefly, to hear their side of it, since there's more than a half a dozen of us here? Sorry, I'm just out of line, but I really think there's as many of us here as there is you guys behind the marble wall here. I think you should really just give us a chance to tell you what we see and what we experience as residents. If it's so important to you to make your decision and having to wait till next year, I think you need to hear us. Because we weren't asked to have the ski loons there, and we're not asked our opinion. You bring.
Sorry, could you step up to the mic? Yeah, if we're gonna.
Yes. I'm Cynthia Gibbs. I own the property at 1410 14th Avenue. I've been there 18 years. The ski loons, my understanding, have been there 9 years. Okay. I will tell you personally, I have lost 2.5 feet of shoreline, not because of erosion from the ice or anything like that. The ice did not and has not gone out on that side of the east side of the lake, or west side of the lake, okay? I'm not opposed to the ski loons being there. What I'm opposed to is the fact that when they practice, their shows, they're all in an area where they're within the park waters, land, riparian stuff. But when they practice, they come from the dock directly towards my house, the neighbor's house, the other house, and their house. And they come from this way, they come out, then they make a turn, and they turn into the shore. They are within 30 to 40, sometimes 20 feet of my dock, their dock. And when they're over on their side of the lake, they do the same thing. Now, the lake is big. Why are they not going down the center of the lake? They do it all the time. They come directly. I have 20 videos on my phone that I will let any one of you look at, conversations I have with Sheriff Klang to communicate these informations. I don't have any one of your others' phone numbers, so I can send you these same videos. It's every night, 4 nights a week, 5 to 8, and I cannot sit outside on my patio and enjoy a conversation because they're roaring. There are 4 and 3 boats in front of the dock. The waves are going up over my shore every time. I think they have disenfranchised me from enjoying my time, my property that I pay taxes for, and I have voted and pay your guys' wages to listen to us and hear us, okay? Because I really think that you haven't given us people a chance. You've talked to Wayne and you've talked to them over on the other side. Who has come over to the other side of the lake and asked us? I personally invite you to my house any one of those nights that they practice and sit at my table at the patio and you watch what you see. And then you tell me that, and you listen to Mr. Thiesing, that there is no problem. There's some minor altercations. I think it's a daily thing. I have watched them come within 5 feet of loons trying to make it across the lake, baby loons who can't dive. They're not seeing them. They're watching skiing, and they're doing their ski thing. Okay, I've watched baby ducks get smashed up against the shoreline, and we're losing them. They're dying. I find them dead. So it's not just my property, their property. It's also the environment as well. I have pictures. I know other people have pictures of their shoreline, what it started with precisely even 5 years ago, and how much I have lost. I think it's something that, whether you put it in your control, the sheriff's department, or what, something has to be looked at carefully. Mr. Thiesing's down there with his little drone thing. Where are they when they do it? Down the center of the lake. The minute he leaves, he can't be to Washington, 210, and they're coming right towards our dock again. I'm not kidding you. If you think I'm kidding, here they are. Look at them. I mean, I'm not over-exaggerating. It has come to the point where we feel we have to get out in our boats and sit 50 feet from our dock so they're not coming that close. And you want to know how far they come? Let's see, what's the distance between that corner and this corner? That far from our boat. Is that appropriate? You tell me. I've probably said a lot, but I think it's important. Thank you for listening. Am I upset? Yes. Sorry.
Oh, just one thing.
Troy.
None of us get paid.
Right. Directly, yes.
Wait, you're getting paid?
I get paid a small amount.
Yes.
In pizza.
Anyone else have thoughts? Otherwise, I have a couple, but I'll go. I feel like we've been muddling through this for my entire time on the park board. I think we've done a disservice to both entities in that we're trying to, well, we thought we had little to no authority to do anything, and so we've been muddling through, and I think it's refreshing to learn that we can try to make a difference in the situation, so I'm excited about that. I'm disappointed to hear from Sergeant Thiesing that there may be boats creating unsafe situations. I understand the factors that lead to that, but I think safety of kids water skiing is still very important. I also feel like we've been misled by the ski loons. In prior discussions, it was emphasized to us that they are just like any other entity on the water, and it now seems very clear that they knew they were not, and they were sort of misleading us through those discussions. So that was disappointing to hear. And finally, I guess I expect the ski loons to honor the contract we've signed, and I think that was the discussion at the last meeting as well, but just want to reiterate that.
Saturday then? Is that what you're addressing there? Saturday practice, or Saturday?
Extra.
August 19th you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, to me, if it's not in the contract or if we haven't signed an amended contract.
Andrew, if I may?
Yeah, Troy.
Thank you, I forget your name.
Cynthia Gibbs.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it sheds a whole new light on this, and, you know, I think, you can blame us if you want, but we go all summer, if we don't hear anything that's going on, you know, and this is kind of in the past as well, and then all of a sudden, hey, this is, you know, this is going on, but I think it's gonna force us to look really hard at if we even decide to do a contract again, and if so, maybe with some guidance from the city attorney and from Sergeant Thiesing, having some different regulations that go along with that. And so, personally, thanks for coming, and thank you, Sergeant Thiesing, and, you know, I think it opens an awareness to us that, I know some videos have been shared in the past, and, you know, if things have been conducted this way, that's unfortunate, and we would not want to sanction an organization that's doing things, even if it's not outside of the contract, that are causing safety issues. So we do hear you, and we will look at this, I'm sure, in a whole different light before if any contract is re-signed. So I'm just one person speaking of the board, but.
Dave.
I want to thank you guys for all coming as well. It is a bit of a pain. I understand that, to show up, right? But it has an impact, and I've voiced that to you guys when you reach out to me, that you shouldn't have to, but it has an impact. When you come and even if you don't say anything, the fact that you come and you're here and you show that your presence is here, it has an effect on the park board members because they get to see that, right? It's not just one household, it's multiple households that all have a concern about it. Our issue with the city is we've always kind of said our interest is butts and seats. We want people using our parks. We want people using our facilities. But there is an impact to that, you know, and we need to be mindful of what that impact is. And it does take you reaching out, and it does take you showing up in order for us to see that. I have concerns with the fact that there's some things that have been said tonight that we have not heard as a park board, or you have not heard as a park board, I have not heard as a city official, that puts me with a little bit of concern about entering into contracts that we're not aware of what we're really entering into. So I have a little bit of concern about this entire process now, in that that's not to put blame on anyone, but it is that we need to do a better job of doing our due diligence to understand that we know what we're entering into. Because again, I have not heard anything about that jump ever being connected to us. And that does make me concerned, not just for insurance purposes, but just in general. That's a big piece of this puzzle that we have been told repeatedly it has nothing to do with us. And so as a city, we have to do a much better job of understanding what we're entering into, and I think this is a big step in that. So I do want to thank you, and I know it's unfortunate to have to come sit through these. I don't like sitting through them myself a lot of the time, but it does a lot, and it means a lot to have you here, and with the sheriff as well. You know, it would be better to be informal, but it's also good because we do the public's business in the public's eye, so the public has a right to hear what is said as well. So.
Is there ever such a thing where we the people just get to talk? Where it's just.
Is there going to be a meeting that we
It's
have?
just about us, you know, and listening to, we've heard what y'all have to say, and I appreciate it a great deal. I've never been to one of these, at least not in the good part, but the sheriff, he mentioned Chris Dents. He's my dentist. I recognize the boat now. He was doing rooster tails at my dock last night.
And ours.
At what, where does the liability fall? Anyway, do we get to talk ever?
Yes, that's a good question. So since we're in the middle of a contract, I think what I've heard from the board is that when we reevaluate this, it'd be January, February meetings. So it's the fourth Tuesday of the month. Agendas in the dispatch, it's online. I'm not going to say that URL. Go to the city website. We have the agenda there. I think if I can work with Jesse and collect folks who have emailed us over the years on this issue, and we can certainly reach out to you when that comes up to the agenda as well. That's, I think, when we'd really look for feedback on a proposed contract. Kind of where we're at is we have a signed contract. It's going to continue through the rest of the summer.
Right.
And then-
Well, in that dock that you're talking about, we were at the park just last weekend and watched 4 teenage boys go out to the dock, climb above it, and sink it, while there was 2 underneath it.
She means the ramp.
Or the ski ramp, yeah. I was concerned enough to send my son, my 37-year-old son, out to make sure that those boys that were underneath it were okay. So that was something I wrote down that I wanted to bring up.
We've actually had to go out and save people from it that couldn't make this one back.
Yeah. It's a scary thing.
We live at 1415 O Street.
I'm going to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. Sorry. I think we do have to move on. I do
Sure.
really appreciate echo everything. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Could I ask, Jennifer, could you just get a sheet where they can put their email addresses down so that when we get to this point, the city then will take on the responsibility of contacting you through your email to let you know that we will be having that meeting?
I will.
Thank you.
That's, yeah, what Dave said, yeah. All right. With that, we're going to move on to item 6B, approving Lyman P. White change order number 13. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So change order 13 is a change order requesting compensation to the contractor for some additional grading, staking that they had to do as part of the project, really to get the grades ready for prep for sodding and seeding. Through their proposal, they were representing a little over $9,000 worth of their staff time to perform the staking. WSB did provide the necessary files that they needed to perform the staking, but beyond the hours that they had allocated to the project, they would have required more WSB hours to do the additional staking that the contractor was asking for. So they did perform this through the contractor, and they were requesting some reimbursement for that. Through that discussion, we decided that really there is shared benefit by them being able to do that work and obviously ultimately construct the project. So we did negotiate with the contractor on a price which is about a third of what their proposal was for that. So with that, I'll answer any additional questions on the matter.
Thanks, Jesse. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jesse, I didn't go back and pull the contract, but was staking specifically laid out in our contract as an allowance item, as a per unit pricing or anything? Or was it simply included as a part of the bid?
Typically, it's included in part of the bid if it's
Okay.
not called out as a separate item, correct?
Fantastic. So help me to understand what happened here, because I'm having even trouble understanding what the impact was of the engineering and the contractor. Why are we paying why is the contractor receiving this? And how did the files work? The files didn't communicate with their GPS system, so we created different files, or they had to do it a different way, or did the engineering firm commit to giving them files that they could not get or use, and then they had to charge for that?
So WSB provided the electronic staking file that they
Yep.
needed to do the staking on the project. WSB obviously did a lot of the staking on the project. The contractor felt that they needed more as the progress of the project continued. Again, we had a certain amount of hours in the WSB contract. If we wanted to have them continue to do more staking, it would have probably been like a contract amendment with WSB. But the contractor felt like they needed to do some more staking to prep the site for the sodding and seeding. So that's what they're requesting is their staff time that they needed to do for the additional staking beyond what they were anticipating.
Was the staking diagram given to the builder before the bidding process or during the construction process? The scope change is what I'm getting at here.
I believe it was during the project that it was provided to them, but I can't say that for sure.
Oh, that's my only question.
Jesse, so what is the impact of not doing the additional staking? Where does that leave the park by? So WSB is saying, we already used up our hours, we're not doing any more staking, you're gonna have to stake. I'm just trying to understand this. You're gonna have to do all this yourself, and then they're saying, well, it's gonna cost this much if we do this, because if we don't do this, what?
So WSB wasn't under contract with the contractor, so it was kind of one of those, every time that they requested the staking from WSB, WSB went out and did the staking that they requested. This is staking that the contractor did almost, I guess, on their own to get the contract moving, or the construction moving forward. WSB had to expend more hours on it, that would be something that we'd probably have to approach us to ask for more hours in the contract for.
I have one more question. So it sounded like the money is going to WSB and not the contractor, but.
Contractor.
Okay, so I'm confused. We just said that WSB did additional staking out there, and that's what we're paying for, is the WSB additional staking or the contractor?
The contractor, sir.
But correct, but the contractor saw the plans ahead of time, he bid staking as a part of his scope of services, and I guess what I'm saying is the scope of work wasn't changed by anything that us or WSB did? Or was it?
That'd be correct. I think it was through the construction process that they felt they needed to do more.
Very good.
I have a,
Karen.
So what would happen if they didn't do this extra staking? I mean, what would the consequence be?
Potentially not have it constructed to the grades that we required, especially with the drainage issues out there. Well, not issues, but getting it to have the right low points and where they were supposed to be, high points where they were supposed to be. It's possible that they wouldn't have graded it accordingly.
Kara?
to me, this just kind of sounds like what happened earlier in the project, that they did something without asking us ahead of time. Is that what I'm understanding? This is already done?
Correct. That was before they were sodding and seeding. This was in prep for getting all the grades of the project ready to go.
So they knew that this was probably going to happen like in April? And it's just coming to us now?
I don't recall when the contractor performed that additional work.
I guess, I mean, it's just kind of frustrating. It's obviously sounded like it was a necessity, but it would have been nice for them to say, oh, hey, we're going to go over, what do you guys think? Instead of just doing it. I know we meet once a month, but lately we've been meeting every other week. So I guess that's where my frustration is on it.
Can I ask a question? Why isn't the contractor here? Oh, because they could answer the questions.
I have one more question for staff, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jesse, there was no supporting documents. This just literally is hours invested by the original bidder, correct? Or
Correct.
He didn't supply that he had to subcontract out underneath him additional staking. This is just their own self-performed labor, correct?
That is correct.
Very
Yep.
good. With that, I'll make a motion to deny the change order number 13 in the amount of $3,345 for staking by the contractor.
I will second that.
Discussion on I guess I have something. The thing that's not quite making sense to me is it feels similar to the concrete pouring challenges we had, where there were change orders or contract amendments, and that there were way more pours by the contractor than I think WSB had intended. And what feels strange to me is that when we were looking at the bids, WSB assured us that they had been working with this contractor throughout the bid process and felt that they were really aligned on the process and the scope of work. And while this is a much smaller number than the pouring and the supervision of that, it's just, it smells a little weird, or at least smells similar to that. And that, I mean, the park's done, right? So like, that ship has sailed, but it makes me wary in the future.
Mr. Chair, one more thing, if I may. Yeah, and by just another added point of my motion, I'm not disputing that the money is owed. I am disputing whether or not the city owes it. That's my issue here. I'm disputing that maybe WSB owes it to the contractor, this, that, or the other thing, but based on what I heard from Jesse, this was a scope of work that's self-performed. The scope of work did not change throughout the project, creating hardship unduly onto the original bidder. So this is one of those aspects of where if you turn in a bid, you're kind of stuck with the bid. And when you reward or when you allow people to come in after the fact that the work is done, what you're really doing is you're rewarding those who didn't really do the due diligence on the front end, and you're punishing those who may have on the back end and actually had their bid right. It was just higher. So I'm going to just kind of stick with my original motion here, and I do appreciate bringing this forward, though. Thank you.
Andrew, one more comment. Is this the same thing that was brought up at the last meeting when Paul Sandy had mentioned that they were requesting additional money and basically WSB told them, no, that's not going to happen? It seems like Paul had mentioned when he came and talked to us last month that this was brought forward and that WSB had told them that no, there's not going to be a change order for this.
I'd have to clarify with what that discussion
I'm
was.
almost positive that happened in the last meeting, and then now, that's why I was surprised to see it coming back again, but even though it's only a third of the cost, but anyway, I know we have a motion and a second, so.
Mr. President, like I said, I just don't, there's seemingly no context, and why is there, to me, it doesn't sound right. So, if we want to readdress it at some other point with a little bit of context, we know exactly what the scope of work was, when it was delivered, always change, like what was changed. Again, it's just so strange to have a change order like this, when this is seemingly something that was just in the scope of work. So again, I'm with Kevin. I don't know if we're the responsible party here, whatever it may be. I think we need more information if we're going to approve a change order like this, but for me, it just doesn't make any sense that this money's being requested from us, so.
Any further discussion on the motion to deny the change order? All right, I'll channel my inner Kelly Bevins. Voting for this means denying the change order. All in favor of denying the change order, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We've denied the change order. That just made it more confusing, didn't it? Oh well, room to grow. Next item, Lyman P. White Stream Bank Restoration Project Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I have WSB on the call as well. They are providing an update on the stream bank restoration design. We're at the 30% plans. I included a couple sheets in there, really looking for park board input on the restoration project so far. Generally, it follows the scope of what we discussed with selective tree harvesting, as well as some kind of erosion control measures, but I'll let WSB kind of clarify a few of those things.
Can you guys hear me? This is Luke Lundy from WSB.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. I want to introduce you to Amy Anderson, who's the project engineer on the project. I'm calling in from being on the road currently, but I'm definitely going to be here to answer any questions. Amy is also, but I want to introduce Amy. She has worked a lot with habitat improvement projects for WSB. I've worked with her for quite a few years, and she's definitely involved from the start of this project. And take it away, Amy.
Thanks, Luke. As Luke said, my name is Anderson. I'm
Sorry, one sec, Amy. You're super quiet in our meeting room. I think I'm not sure if that's us or you. We think it might be your mic.
Let's try that. Is that any better?
Way better. Thank you.
Okay. Should I talk quieter now?
No, it's perfect.
We're good. Okay. Thank you. My name is Amy Anderson. I am a project manager here at WSB, and the packet or the plans that you have provided in your packet are the 30% plans. So these are the concept level designs for Mississippi Riverbank restoration. And this is meant to work in conjunction with your parks project that you've recently been working on. And I can go through the plans in sort of an overview if the board would like that. Otherwise, I can merely take questions and comments that you might have on the design. Do you have a preference?
Looking for kind of a short overview, or do we just have questions? What are we thinking?
I wouldn't mind seeing a brief preview of what they got.
I think a quick overview would be great, Amy. This sort of works newer to us, so some background would be awesome.
That sounds good.
Amy, let's start with the walkthrough that we did with Jesse first. Out in the field with Paul and Jesse, when we were kind of doing a walkthrough to determine potentially what we were going to propose for habitat improvement.
So we did a walkthrough, and this, we being myself, Luke, Jesse, and Paul Sandy, who's also from WSB. We walked this entire stream bank on the east bank of the Mississippi River. And we ended down at College Drive. We actually started at the new park and Bandshell area, and this was in late April. There was still ice on Mille Lacs, I remember that. And so we walked this entire length, and we talked about what the park board was interested in seeing and what your wishes were for this project. And we were looking at installing some habitat features and also some protection for that eastern bank of the Mississippi River, because now that you guys have made that huge investment into that lovely park and you have that nice trail running alongside the river, we want to make sure that we protect those investments for the future and make sure that you don't have major erosion issues in the future. Do I have the capacity to share my screen, or would we rather just sort of talk about the pages of the plan set? What is preferred?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen. That'd be awesome.
Let's give that a try. Okay, you guys should see a PDF that should look familiar, but it has some comments on it in red. Is everyone in the room seeing that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so, and I will say that these comments that I have written in here in red text are comments that I've received from conversations with Jesse as we've discussed this plan set. We can add to those. Part of this conversation is getting more comments and more thoughts from the park board. So I will be essentially taking notes as we talk, and if there's ever a point where you ask a question or you want to change something and I write it down and you don't feel I've captured the spirit of your comment, just let me know. So starting from upstream and moving downstream, we have a selective harvest of some of the sort of lower, some less desirable trees that we have kind of up here at the north end. A lot of times, and I will show some more detail on this, but we plan to use those trees as a bank stabilization method as we go downstream. So when we harvest those trees, we harvest them with the root ball, the roots below the surface intact, and we use that root ball as actually a method of protecting the shoreline as we go farther down. So we're proposing selective tree harvest in here. And when I say selective, a lot of times when we work with cities on these stabilization projects, one of the first things we hear is take all the elm trees because they're susceptible to Dutch elm disease anyway. So we often take trees that the city, if they have a tree harvest plan or something like that, is eventually planning on removing anyway. So we try to make lemons out of lemonade. If you have to take trees down, make them trees that you want removed. So we have selective harvest up here. And then we have, and we will look at these in a larger scale in just a minute, but we have some of these log deflectors that protect against erosion here near the park. We have a few more right here off of the parking lot. And then as we move downstream, we have more of them. And this one has, because this is one of the sort of most exposed sections of the bank, this is kind of where the river is coming around this curve. We have some additional rock around those deflectors right here. And then it's hard to see at this scale. I will move to another scale page in just a second. We have additional deflectors as we move downstream towards College Drive, excuse me. And then we had also spoken to Jesse about when we are working on construction for this project, where a contractor would be able to stage their materials and do their work. And we've got tentative plans for staging areas. One is going to be south of College Drive and one is going to be north of College Drive. And then I understand that Jesse has already had some conversations with the school and the school board. We need to make sure that the lanes on East River Road remain open during construction. That shouldn't be a problem. We are planning for pedestrian and bike safety to close the trail during this work, and this work is tentatively proposed right now for like late fall, early winter. So you're not going to have a lot of bike and pedestrian traffic, but I know there's people outside in all weather. But because that trail is right next to where contractors would be working with heavy equipment, and because people are curious, we would propose to close that trail during work for pedestrian safety.
So the other thing we are also proposing, everyone, is removal of buckthorn adjacent to the trail and within that east bank, so we can open up the view shed at the river, as kind of we previously discussed as one of the goals of the project at the same time.
Yes, so this yellow hatch that's in kind of the southern half of the project, that's the area where we are planning on both the selective tree harvest as needed and the buckthorn removal. Up here in the north section, we did not see significant amounts of buckthorn that needed to be managed. So that's why the hatches are different. This is selective tree removal, and then this is selective tree harvest and also buckthorn management. Thanks, Luke. As we move down, so then we have a sort of closer up view of all of these areas of stabilization. We have, this is near your park area right here. We have 4 deflectors here. And then this is the start of that tree harvest and buckthorn management area. We've tried to put in some of the as-built information from your new park. So that's why you kind of see the trail right there. And then we have 3 deflectors with a little bit of extra rock in this section. And then as we move downstream, we've kind of put one of these deflectors every 100 feet or so. And and I'll show you one of the construction details that I think helps understand what these look like. The question that I most often get asked when I talk about these deflectors is like, are you going to be able to see them? And most of the time you're not going to be able to see them. If they're above the water, they're not doing their job of sort of pushing the high velocity flows away from the bank and helping to deflect those flows, those velocities that cause erosion. So you'll see that under the very lowest conditions, you should see only like the top half to top third of that buried log. And under a higher water condition, you won't see anything at all. So these are very low visible impact structures that are mostly buried in the bank, with some rock overtopping it as sort of a counterweight.
So the great thing about these is with the funding source that you have, obviously you have to include habitat improvement. These structures provide also habitat for fish, besides stability of the bank and directing flows away from the bank to reduce future erosion in the locations that Amy has just shown you.
And then I'll talk a little bit about our last, and this one was hard. One of the notes, and this is a very correct note that we got on our 30% plan set, is that we actually have, they're hard to see, we have a few of what are called these boulder clusters, and those are also considered a habitat feature. If you look at the, we group these rocks together, and they're meant to be sort of resting habitat for fish. So they're meant to be a large enough rock that you develop a pool or a deeper, slower velocity area behind that rock. And there's only going to be a couple of these. Right now in our plan set, I think we have 2 that are meant to be within casting distance of your new park. But they're not going to be obstructions to people who are using the river for kayaking, for canoeing, for boating, for other purposes. So they're just meant to be sort of an additional spot where if you are a fish, you have a little bit slower flow, you can hang out if you need to. And we're only doing, right now our plan set only involves a couple of those.
All these so that they're below water level, but they're below prop level too, with boats that traffic over, as Amy just talked about. But they really open up that accessibility, especially with the improvements we're doing on the shoreline for fishability for the public at the same time.
And with that, I think I've walked through sort of the main components of our design, and I would be happy right now to take your questions.
Thank you. Troy?
Thank you for that presentation. My biggest concern is, one, the invasive species. Sorry, thanks again, Kevin. And their ability to return. And so, you know, the beauty of the river, to be able to see it, you know, I don't want all the vegetation removed, but, you know, to be able to view the river and enjoy the river and more than just a year so or two. So it's removing these invasive species. Is there others besides just the buckthorn that's there? And then
So
also the low vegetation as well, just to be able to view the river and use, people using that trail, that walkway, and to be able to take in what's right alongside them there, other than the pavement on the other side. So that's my biggest concern is, is that a big part of this project? Long-term removal of those invasive species.
So that is a very valid point. If you don't mind, Jesse, I could start with it if you want me to, or if you want to start first, that's fine with me.
No, go ahead.
So with this invasive species removal, we end up doing the spraying of the stumps at the same time to hinder buckthorn from reestablishing. Now, obviously, we all know that's not 100% fail-safe, but as part of this, yes, we will have to do continued management, because that's part of the overall grant funding source. When you receive that funding, they want to know how you're going to manage these areas. So I think it would easily be, we could put together a summary of how to manage these continued after removal, but I think your park staff have a really good idea of buckthorn removal. The other species that we're planning on utilizing, although it's not an invasive species, is removing some of the box elder trees that are in there too that are fairly thick. With that walkthrough that we did, it was mainly comprised, especially adjacent to where the park area is, box elder and buckthorn. So I think you're going to be very happy when you see the removal of it, but definitely a valid point that continued maintenance is a need to ensure that you're going to have those riverview sheds, from now on.
And I would also like to say that this is actually, as we talk about, trees, because I know when we do these projects, especially when we do these projects in public parks, that are on the river, we always get people when we're doing them that are like, oh no, you're taking down the trees. And I would really like the board's feedback on what you would like to do because right now we are talking about for the removal of trees that we are going to use for bank stabilization is on the order of 20. Now we would have to remove we will have to remove more than that because you have to be able, we might need to remove a few for the staging area. We will need to remove trees to bring heavy equipment down to install these structures. So it's not like only 20 trees, but we're not talking about 100 trees. But you as a park board, we would like your thoughts on what you would like to see, because when we take these trees up and we harvest them by the roots, there's a big hole left in the ground. And obviously we're not going to leave the hole there, but you as a park board can provide us with valuable direction on, for maximum river visibility, do you just want to leave that, do you just want to fill in that hole, seed it over and leave that spot so that it's an open place that people can then, you would have a little less density than you have in that area right now? Do you want to plant a container tree so that when you took out a tree in 10 or 15 years, you'll have a tree that replaces it? Do you want to plant smaller vegetation that maybe people could see over or through? All these things are things that we'd really like your thoughts and feedback on, because people who use the park will have thoughts and feedback on it for sure.
I have a question for Jesse. What's the budget on this again? I know it's the grant that we have, but if we're going to replace trees, how much do we have to spend?
We should be able to accommodate planting new trees in there if that's the case. I think it was around 200,000 is about what we had left for the project.
Okay, thank you.
What are our thoughts on replace trees? I think open views, sort of shorter vegetation. Yeah,
Andrew? So me personally, I don't want to take trees out and then put trees back in to the point of you have to stop and look around to try to view the river. My thought was that we have easy visual access to the river, and then if we plant a bunch of shrubs and brush, they grow up and then you kind of lose that again anyway. And maybe it's maybe it's in these spots, maybe it's kind of a sporadic thing. That I'm not against adding new trees back in, and I'm just sharing my opinion. But I don't want to add a tree for every one we take out, because I think that's going to kind of defeat the purpose, and or throw a bunch of vegetation in there. That's my thought on this whole thing, was that we increase the visual access to the river. So that's just my opinion on it.
And it does not have to be a one-to-one substitution. If we're planning on harvesting, 20 trees, we could buy 10 container trees. We could sort of, meet in the middle. There's, you know, it's not, it doesn't have to be like either or. We can accommodate a happy medium.
Yeah.
So for this, I'll give you a really good example. Like for the city of Frontenac along the Mississippi River, in their park, we created view shed sections in which we had lower vegetation, kind of like exactly what your comment was. But then other areas, it was just selective harvesting in some spots, but it was a number of different view sheds. So it wasn't only just it being wide open, because the city of Frontenac schools did not want to include complete decimation of all the vegetation along the river corridor.
Sure. Can you get some of those pictures into our hands, just to, we have something to look at, to reference?
Absolutely, I can put that together. We can actually give you kind of the plans that we did, because that was also an LCCMR grant that we utilized for creating those view sheds. And like Amy had discussed, we also did some plantings, but it was shorter shrubs that didn't block the view shed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, kind of the sense I'm getting, I think, is we definitely want to open up some views to the river, but also we'd love your guidance on maybe what looks nice or what seems to work well. We are definitely not experts on stream bank restoration, so yeah, those examples would be awesome.
Just one quick thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, and we could talk with the parks staff also on kind of some of the desired species, especially maintenance-wise, that they would be interested in, because we can look at those different various heights of vegetation. The biggest thing is not exactly what you said. Let's not plant something that just blocks the view shed. Again, it might look aesthetically nice, but you're still kind of defeating the purpose of not seeing the river corridor. Or plant them lower on the landscape, adjacent to the shoreline, so that you don't get that blockage from vegetation like you currently are having.
Kevin, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one other factor I want to add into this. It would seem to me that we should definitely strongly consider that one of our key objectives should be low maintenance going into the forward thinking with this. So if we, sounds like a couple of the drivers are to improve the view, but I would also add that make this strip of land easy to maintain with whatever our plantings that come back in there for the next 25, 30 years. So we're not putting a ton of effort to keep this looking the way it does every couple of years. So that's all, just low maintenance future.
Yeah. Good idea. The last thing is you want to plant a lot of shrubs that does nothing but collect flood debris that you have to clean out of there. So.
Sounds horrible. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for kind of running through the plans, and we'll look for those examples from Frontenac.
Yeah, I think we have a couple other ones too that are in Minneapolis. I'll probably give you a couple different project examples. So it's always great getting park board input at this stage instead of we're 3/4 of the way through the project and you don't like what you see. So I really appreciate everybody's input on the project.
And as we send you those additional documents, or if you have additional questions, or, you know, you want to talk about anything that you see, feel free to, you know, talk to Jesse. He can put you in touch with me, or if you have comments after this meeting and you want to share those with Jesse, we'll incorporate those into our next version, our next more detailed design for this project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Luke.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for inviting us to the meeting. We appreciate it.
Let's hope we get goats.
18 goats.
Yeah, for the buck farm. Yeah.
Let's they be on the river.
We could put out one of those little things for 25 cents, feed the goats too.
Yeah.
That's how we fund it.
City-run petting zoos is definitely going to help our capital budget. Next,
I don't know if there's a safety plan we can write up for that, though.
notes float away. Next item, discussion on cannabis use in parks. Jesse, kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you weren't aware, beginning August 1st, cannabis use will be legalized and decriminalized. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but there's a lot of communities that are starting to this discussion or implementing restrictions regarding use in public areas, including public parks. Really what we're looking for is some direction from the park board. If the park board would like us to propose some sort of an ordinance to the city council on use of cannabis within the parks, whether that be using the flower as smoking or some of the edibles or drinkables, THC products, whether they should be allowed in the parks. Really, we're just kind of looking for that direction here as we're getting close to that implementation period of that. I did want to mention in here that what I included in there from an enforcement standpoint, knowing what PD has to go through with an enforcement is we don't have anything on the books regarding just regular smoking. So for them from a distance, it's going to be difficult for them to really regulate one or the other. So if there's discussion about both and making parks smoke free entirely, or if it would be one or the other, just keep that in mind as well.
Excellent. Questions for Jesse? Discussion.
So right now, there's no smoking during youth events or sports, right? That is what's stated for our city parks. Is that correct?
I believe there's a
Packaged
distance
cigarettes?
also to the playground equipment or to children activities.
Okay.
I have to look that up, but a little fuzzy on that.
No, Dave?
Yeah, I'm fuzzy with it, just like Kevin is, but I believe there are definitely signs posted.
It's
I
within
think we had
100
some
feet.
signs placed, didn't we, at certain
Yeah.
areas in
No
certain
tobacco
parks?
use within a youth sporting event within 100 feet.
100 feet, okay.
There we go.
Thanks.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
So I was at Kiwanis Park. I don't know, it's a while ago now. And there was an individual that, it was quite strong. I started to get hungry while I was down there. But, you know, that kind of stuff around kids, this was at Kiwanis, so anywhere a person went there is going to be, to me, that's, it just, you know, it's one thing, and I'm not saying one's worse or the other, but if you're drinking, it's right there in your hand, and, but if you're smoking this stuff, it's being shared with
Not the way I drink.
many individuals around you. Well, yeah, you have to get some of it in your mouth, but, anyway, that's, I think it's good for us to try to head the problem off ahead of time, and I kind of mixed feelings about it, and the others, should we wait and see if there's a problem, but two theories there, but
Can I ask a question? What's your policy on drinking?
Sir, you need to leave right now. That kind of talk will not be tolerated.
we'll be here till 8 o'clock.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So I was looking at the attachment here that Detroit Lakes took at this, and my general leaning with this is, let's go that route first. Let's say, hey, not doing it, and then see what kind of pressure we get down the road from people who say, hey, we want cannabis in our parks. Because I believe that if we take the opposite and we go ahead and let it in, it's going to be much, much more difficult to get it back out versus see what comes from pressures to allow it in. Now, there's also a factor here that I've heard bantered about on some of these discussions versus the medicinal values and the medicinal uses of this, which I think a lot of people would argue that alcohol potentially has medicinal advantages at times as well. But no, anyways, my point being is my leaning is to take the stab or to take the initial position on this of basically exactly what Detroit Lakes is doing here. And if you read what they said, they're saying, no, you can't use it in public spaces and then reevaluate in a year or whenever, a year after. See what kind of feedback we get. But it's going to be much more difficult to go the opposite way, in my opinion. That's all.
I would like to propose that we do our parks all smoke-free if we're going to do this. Because you said in the notes, it's going to be hard for the police to tell if they're smoking a joint or smoking a cigarette unless they get close to them. I say this might be an opportunity to make our parks smoke-free. Just thought.
That's your
Good thought.
Oh, thanks.
Andrew?
Yeah, okay, try.
And I see where you're coming with that, and this, I know we've talked about this before, and my take on that is, how many people do we not want to come to the parks with their kids because they're smokers, and they say, we're not going there because I can't smoke there. And, it's an open space, it's not a controlled substance, marijuana, alcohol are controlled substances, so I don't know that we can, personally, I don't know that I want to attach that to the same category as smoking cigarettes. If a single mom or father is willing to take their kids to Kiwanis or somewhere because they can sit on their phone and smoke a cigarette at the same time. I'm just saying that's what I see. But, and then if we say, nope, none of that either, next thing you know, maybe kids aren't gaining access to the parks because we put so many restrictions on them that they just say, well, I'll just stay home. I'll go somewhere else. It might seem far-fetched, but I think we have to consider it.
I do like the idea. I apologize, Mr. Chair. I do like the idea of like fully smoke-free if we're going to take this route, but I do. It kind of goes back to the alcohol situation. Like, do we really enforce? Like, do we have our police department going down to stamp out somebody lighting up a cigarette in one of our parks? And how do we? Is that really the approach we want to take with something like that? So I am in kind of the same camp. Like, if we're going to say no on weed in the parks, we probably shouldn't generalize and try to make it more consistent. But then again, is that the position we want to take by restricting people that way, and then have our law enforcement handling those types of situations, or are we just going to be like, well, no, you can't smoke and wink, that sort of thing again? So I think we go with the Detroit Lakes thing on the marijuana situation, but I think that's something we kind of need to look forward on the smoke-free side of things in the future.
Dave.
Yeah, so I'm surprised at my position on this because I personally don't have a lot of concern with people consuming products, right? I just don't really. That's your life, go consume. However, 4th of July, there was an individual that decided to toke up right behind my family and my children, and their young children, 3 and 5. And I was surprised at how off-putting that was. So there is a difference to the marijuana to the cigarette itself, because it is pungent. It's very pungent, and you are in it.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see if there is a difference between smoking and consuming. If someone's popping a edible, there's a big difference to that than someone is toking up a gravity bong. I said that for the record. In our city parks.
I don't know what those are.
That's a 90s thing.
What is that? Do you have a picture?
But marijuana, when it is being smoked, there is a thickness to it, let's say, right? And it was, I will say, as a parent, it was off-putting, and that was the first time that I had ever thought about, okay, well, this is a reality then that we will be dealing with. So
Yeah, I think my thoughts are kind of aligning on smoke-free, right? It's something you're doing that affects those around you, whether it's tobacco, which is legal, or marijuana, which is legal, that's fine. But the park is not the place to go to share that with people who are also using a public resource with you. I think my challenge with the Detroit Lakes Code is that, like, our discussion with alcohol was, what are we willing to enforce? And I don't really imagine the Brainerd Police Department checking someone's brownies to say, right, is there THC in these brownies or not? Like, smash them on the ground, throw, like, I don't think that's a road we want to go down, and I think prohibiting consuming of THC in a brownie, right, that is what I get from the Detroit Lakes Code, and I don't see that as being a reasonable course for us to take unless we have serious problems. So,
Although, in the same breath, that's never gonna be brought up. If somebody's popping, whether there's gummies or something, or eating brownies, who's ever gonna know that? That's never, I don't think that's ever gonna be an issue. I think the issue is gonna be if they're smoking it. You know, if they wanna go sit in their car and eat a brownie or pop a gummy, or if they have sweet and sour, whatever candies they are, who's gonna know, and who's that? That's not gonna hurt a kid who's gonna get inundated with a cloud of, you know, marijuana smoke. So I hear what you're saying, but maybe to make it this easy, kind of Kevin's comment to the you know, can you drink alcohol in our parks? We could go down a road, we could spend a lot of time on this, trying to find all the little things, instead of just saying, nope, can't do it there, because those things I don't think are ever gonna come up. Somebody having brownies, or somebody eating gummy bears, or versus somebody smoking off a pipe when there's 30 kids around, and, you know, that, I think that's the thing that we're trying to prevent here.
yeah, I totally agree. Just going through what we all went through with the alcohol in the parks is very much, what are we willing to enforce? And so I wouldn't want us to say, hey, city council, we don't think there should be any cannabis use in the parks. And then just kind of be like, yeah, but we know we're never going to enforce edibles.
Yeah, but if we take the one out that's gonna cause a problem by doing that, and the other 90% that's not causing a problem is still being done, just like people drinking in the parks, people drink in the parks. They're not hurting anybody, it's not been a problem, they're not gonna enforce it. But I'm just saying, we could spend a really long time on this, or we could just make a broad statement and say this is what it is, and people who are gonna eat their gummy bears and bring their brownies or whatever it is, they're gonna do that irregardless. So, I don't know, that's my take on that, but I would like to just see, let's just do an overarching, say, nope, it's not accessible. The stuff that's not a problem isn't gonna be a problem, it isn't gonna need to be enforced, so it'll just, that's my opinion.
Do we have to come to an agreement, or is that enough for you to go back and say, there's mixed feelings on this?
Planning
that's
Commission's
kind of,
looking at this also, so it's coming up.
What was that?
Planning Commission will be looking at some of this also in the upcoming months as well. More around dispensaries, but I think the conversation, knowing what I know about the Planning Commission, will get off into some of these spaces.
Into the weeds.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you.
I saved that for you. I said, I gave you the setup. That was the assist.
I think the general thought of what I'm hearing is, to your point about mixed opinions on the matter, but what I've heard probably most commonly so far is probably smoke-free, both cigarettes and cannabis, but maybe less on the edibles. I know it's not unanimously discussed, but that's.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I'm not sure I can go along with
Two
that.
on that.
No, I don't either. I'd say make it a sweeping, no cannabis use.
And leave the smoking alone.
Just leave the smoking alone.
I don't want to keep the smoking in, and just throw it out
like
there.
you're mixed.
There's a couple people that, yeah, just see, because if, I don't know who gets to make the final decision.
From a procedural point, the way to do it would be to have it not in and then have an amendment potentially made to what is presented. That would be the easiest way to have it presented to you guys. It is not in, you could try to have the amendment added, the vote could be made to add it to the proposed. Would be the easiest way to do it.
Correct. So I guess I would look for park board direction on what you would like me to present to the council.
I almost feel like this is two items personally, cannabis and smoking. Just separate the two to give us the ability to make a decision on each without necessarily having a wholesale decision affecting the other. So
I generally agree with that. I think there's maybe a third item, which is vaping, just because that can, confusingly, it can be tobacco or cannabis, but it is also in the same family of the thing I'm doing is going into your space, which I feel like is part of what we're concerned about with smoking of any kind.
yeah.
Yeah, I just see it as, it's a way to get the smoking and the vaping, if you're adding that in. Otherwise, just to like randomly bring it up, I feel like we tried to bring it up, a couple of years ago, and it kind of just died. So just another opportunity to possibly bring it to discussion. But again, I guess if we're like doing majority rules, right, isn't it probably like 3 against 2? And I guess maybe I'm the only one who really wants to talk about the smoking.
No, I think it's
You
a
do
great
too?
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Boards change, things change.
So let's do this in 3 sections. Let's start with smoking. Would someone like to fashion a motion regarding the park board's views on smoking in the parks?
I'll fashion a motion that we leave it where it is right now. The smoking, the restrictions we have in the parks for smoking cigarettes be left alone. That's my motion on that.
I'll second.
Discussion on smoking and leaving it where it is.
I feel like we got off base.
We're in a 2-hour meeting, adding agenda items as we go. This is
No, I'm like,
awesome.
I feel like
Very on brand.
I didn't bring this up to make us go off course.
No,
So,
it's in the agenda. You're
well,
fine.
cannabis is, okay.
Staff would like input from the park board regarding all forms of smoking. It's
Okay.
it's all Jesse's fault, really, is what we're now.
I don't have any discussion.
I guess my thought is I think this is a good time for us to look at where we're at with drug use in the park, given that we've just dealt with alcohol. And so I would be more in favor of moving to a smoke-free park as we look at other types of smoking that are going to be legal here in 5 or 6 days. So, I will vote no. But any other discussion?
Just a roll call.
We will.
And Jonathan goes last.
I think Brittany gets to decide who goes when. I'm just gonna leave that.
I agree.
Let's do a roll call vote on this, please.
Okay, roll call vote. Schaefer,
Or if we want smoking in the parks.
The motion is to leave it as is.
motion is to leave as is. Yes.
No.
Oh, Shape,
No.
Jaeger,
Yes.
Rushmeyer,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
All right, since cannabis is gonna be a whole thing, next one would be on policy on vaping in the park. I don't think we have anything about that today, unless you consider tobacco use to be vaping, but now you have to ask somebody what they're vaping, and that's a whole thing, and I suspect the police department's not interested in that. Quite rightly.
So
Troy?
I agree. I don't think they're interested in that. And I think vaping, if it's marijuana, that will fall under whatever we decide to do with cannabis. And so whether it's vaping, regular smoke, whatever the heck it is, or cannabis, I think we leave that fall under the cannabis part of it. So my motion is that vaping as is, I think falls under the same thing that cigarette smoke is in our parks right now, and that we leave that alone, and if it's cannabis through a vape, that'll fall under our cannabis regulation. So I think we still keep it separate. We keep cannabis and non-cannabis separate.
we're going to have a tough time enforcing people smoking cannabis if we continue to allow them to smoke cigarettes. So it kind of falls in the same category with vaping and using THC products within the vape. So, I mean, if we're going to keep smoking, we're going to need to keep e-cigarettes and vaping still for use inside of our parks. So that's just, it's just a similar type of enforcement. If people are going to smoke cigarettes, it's still going to be tough for law enforcement to determine whether it's cannabis or not. And it's the same with e-cigarettes. They're just going to have a tough time deciphering whether or not they're smoking a THC product. So I think, again, for me, I voted yes on allowing smoking to remain in our parks. It's going to be the same for me on e-cigarettes and vapes.
We need a motion.
Yes, please.
I would make a motion that vaping be considered the same as our regulations for smoking, unless, of course, it's cannabis, which we're gonna have a motion on here in a minute, so. That vaping currently, what it is right now, is left alone.
I second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion of, I'm going to say no action? Is that a fair representation, Troy?
Yep.
No action on vaping. Roll call, please, Brittany.
All right, Schaefer,
No.
Shipe,
No.
Jaeger,
Yes.
Rushmeyer,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Excellent. Our third part of our self-made problem, cannabis. I think we've discussed this. Would anyone like to attempt a motion on this?
I think my motion is going to be not necessarily to wholesale omit cannabis right now, but my motion is going to be to direct staff to come back with a sample ordinance for us to read.
Nothing, I thought you were saying with the sample, but that's okay, continue.
Just to bring us a potential ordinance to look like, because this is different from the first two, because this is a new creation of a new ordinance. So again, my motion is to have staff craft up a possible public ordinance modeling the unlawful use in public space, similar to what we had provided for us in the Detroit Lakes ordinance.
I will second that motion.
Okay, sorry.
And that's all cannabis, not just smoking.
That's correct.
Is this where I make the amendment?
You can propose an
I will
amendment,
not.
yes.
No, we'll just keep going, otherwise we're not gonna get here.
Yes.
You can bring it up when we get the sample ordinance.
Yeah,
also.
I'll do that. I'll wait till that meeting.
I'm sure that'll be a much lighter.
Okay.
I guess all I had in discussion is I thought we had gotten to a good spot with alcohol use where we were really thinking about ordinances in terms of what we wanted to enforce. And this feels like we're explicitly saying we know we're not going to enforce edibles, but we'd like to prohibit them anyway. And that feels sort of contradictory to me.
I don't know if it's not a willingness to want it to enforce. I mean, if there's someone sitting at a picnic table and they're laying all their goodies out and indulging and sharing, that makes it pretty easy to enforce, But if somebody's got some in their pocket and they're popping a few gummy bears or eating a brownie in their car, who's ever gonna know? Is what I'm trying. I'm just saying it's gonna be trying to look at what's going to affect people more around them and be easier to enforce. But I don't know that we even need a motion for this. I mean, basically, Kevin, what you're asking is you're recommending staff come back with something for us to review moving forward.
I think what Jesse's looking for is kind of the majority opinion of the park board on what we would want to restrict or not restrict with cannabis.
Okay.
So I don't really agree, right? Jesse wants, right, direct. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
It's pretty well documented that it is a split board on the matter. To put something together, I'd like at least a general consensus of what the park board's looking for, and then obviously it'll still be a continued discussion.
Yeah, so if I may, I'm with you, honestly, like the edibles side, I mean, we really can't enforce it, so I mean, why is it included in the ordinance? You know, and we're talking about nuisance for people around you. So I mean, why are we putting restrictions on edibles and things of that nature inside of the ordinance? So I am actually with Andrew on this one.
I'll amend my motion to remove the language of edibles and hemp-derived consumer products, lower potency hemp edibles and hemp-derived consumable products.
The seconder okay with the amendment?
Yes, I am, yep.
Fabulous. Let us end the pain, Brittany, and please call a roll call.
Roll call vote. Here we go. Schaefer?
Okay, so, sorry, what is?
The motion is actually not to adopt this. The motion is just to have Jesse draft us an ordinance to bring it back. And that ordinance would say it's a ban on smoking marijuana in public spaces.
Okay, yes.
Shipe?
Yes.
Jaeger?
Yes.
Rushmeyer?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Thank you.
My golly.
Thank you.
That's better than 3-2.
Go team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just before we move on, that was, I will say, drawn out, but I think we had really good discussion, so.
Sorry, I brought up
Direction.
the smoking thing. I
It
think it
was-
needed to
it
be
was
brought
good.
up.
Yeah, it was great. Sorry for making you wait an hour and 45 minutes.
That's what he's here for.
Discussion on.
Is it possible I can show something on the screen?
Brent.
There's a file in here called Rotary. Well, thank you for having me here. It was an interesting meeting. My name is David Winkleman, currently with the Winkleman Solar Developers, and I'm also a Rotarian, and I'm the environmental director for the Noon Rotary Club in Brainerd. And there's like 3 issues that I want to bring up, and I'll try to make it fairly quick. First is the financial aspect of it, how it's going to affect the city, and the second is the environmental aspect of it, and educational aspect, and third is the plug-ins or the electricity at the park. What are we going to do with that? So could you load the file?
Is it this one I have pulled up here?
No, it's a spreadsheet. It's an Excel file.
Oh,
And I assume that all of you have seen the other one that he showed, which is like a 10-page thing. But this is a cash flow analysis that we do for solar projects. So I can see it. Can everybody read the numbers? I'm an old geezer, so. First of all, the park, the Rotary Pavilion is built so that the roof faces due south, 180 degrees. So we designed it that way for solar. The Rotary Club International has put an environmental pillar in place for all the clubs need to do environmental projects. And this is one, the Rotary Park is just a beautiful gem for the city, 190 acres. And so right in the heart of it now is the Rotary Pavilion. And we want to make that an educational place. So they can see how the solar works very directly, have a kiosk there to look at the panels and look at how much energy it's producing and so on. And then if they plug in a crock pot or use the lights, they'll be able to see how much energy is being used, and so on and so. But anyhow, the cost that we got bids from 3 different installers, I guess, a little closer. $26,752 was the best bid. Came in at $3.02 a watt. And as solar projects go, $3.50 a watt for a project this small is about the going price. So we got some good bids. This one's from Real Solar up in Bacchus. We got 2 other bids as well from local contractors, which are in that other document. But I want to have him bring the screen all the way up, look at the bottom number, $61,229. That's the amount of electricity that it'll produce for the city over 30 years. And it's guaranteed for 30 years to produce that amount of electricity. I've been waiting for 3 years to make this presentation, so I'm a little nervous. The cost on it is $26,000, so you'll get your money. The money, it'll pay back for itself several times over. But now go back up to the top of the spreadsheet and see what there's a federal ITC in yellow. That stands for Investment Tax Credit, and the government just passed a rule called the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that allows cities and municipalities and nonprofits to get that money paid directly to them in a check from the Treasury. So since the project cost $26,000, there's $10,701 that'll get returned directly. Then the Rotary has 2 grants, and I've been assured that both of those will happen. One's for $5,000 from the local club, and the other's for $5,000 from the district. So we'll get another $10,000 there. So the cost of the city is going to be $6,051. So you get 10 times that amount back in the 30 years that you have it. And we do have maintenance figured into this. It's figured into the savings and income category. There's also depreciation on the cells themselves. They slowly degrade about 0.5% per year. And there's, well, that's the financial picture. I'll make this quick. So you'll end up, $61,229 total. But there's also another thing called the RECs, the Renewable Energy Credit. And that'll allow me to get into the environmental aspect of this. Look outside right now. We're facing a climate emergency. We've got fires burning all over the world. We've got hotter temperatures than we've ever had. The oceans are up to 100 degrees around Florida. We've got situations going on all over the world. We need to do something environmentally responsible to help reduce emissions. Now, emissions from energy are only one part of the emissions in the world, but fossil fuels in our vehicles and the land is emitting carbon as well. But about 20% of our total global worldwide emissions are coming from electricity from coal and oil. And we've got that blowing over from the Dakotas and Montana. We get plumes of the smoke that come over us here, like the wood smoke in Canada too. Our fish, the DNR says we can't eat more than 1 fish a week if we visit here, or 1 fish a month if we live here, because they have too much mercury in them. The mercury comes from burning coal in the Dakotas. It comes in the plume of smoke that drops methyl mercury into our waters. And I should say I was president of the Water Foundation for 35 years, so I have a lot of information on that. And we do need to do something. I'm talking about a climate emergency. And all of us need to wake up and look at what's going on in the world right now and do what we can. So the Rotary is trying to get this example out to the public of here we can generate $62,000 worth of emission-free electricity for the city. And we want to give this project to you so that the grants and the ITC will come directly to you. You'll have to pay $6,051 for the start of it. And that's a question that I also want to add something to that. If we want to have plug-ins at the park, this is the third issue. We want to have plug-ins for people to use the pavilion, like for parties and events where they can have crock pots and other things plugged in and have lights for it. Then we need to run a supply line from BPU out to the pavilion. There's not one there. I talked to BPU. I think Jesse was in the meeting when Trent Hawkinson spoke and said that they would give a discount on running that line. Now, we don't have an exact price. His first bid was $3,100. Then I also got a hold of Jim's Electric and said, what would it cost to wire this place up and get nice lighting at night and put up the kiosk and so on? And they had like $5,100, but they said they'd take $1,000 off of that if because of donation to the Rotary. So that's the other issues. If you want to have the electricity at the pavilion usable, for the public, then there's going to be another expense. But that's not Rotary's issue here. We just want to bring that up to the city and see what you want to do with the Rotary Pavilion. So I guess I've addressed both issues already, the financial issue, the environmental issue, and then the plug-in issue. So I'd like to get your comments and ideas and feedback on that and take it back to the Rotary Club. I can't stay too much longer because my wife needs to be cared for. She was in a bad accident, so she can't feed herself at this point. So I got to run home pretty soon. But I'd like to hear what you have to say. So thanks for listening to me.
Yes, thank you. Questions? I guess I should stay up here. Oh, Jesse, yeah.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. So in the agenda item, I list 8,900. So that was what was listed in the cash flow analysis that's in the 10-page packet. But the difference is really in the federal grant. So the federal grant lists
that went
8,000 in this one.
30% to 40%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So there's a 10% bonus they just added for Made in USA. And we want to actually make the Minnesota-made product here. Haleen is a company from the Iron Range that's making panels by the millions right now up there. And they're shipping them all over the world. They've got like 108 jobs that they've started up there now and a bunch of others in the future. They just got a big grant to build more onto the plant. So we want to support Haleen products. And so we get 10% off for that, or 10% more credit. Other questions?
Kevin.
I have just a global question, and please don't take this as smart alecky or that. But my global question is if solar is, if deals like this are such a great deal, why is it that solar companies are always trying to sell solar panels to other people instead of just installing them themselves and taking the money?
Oh, most of the smart ones are doing that. The big companies are doing that. But you get residential installers, I mean, they're just two guys in a truck, that are just trying to sell as many projects as they can. But the big companies like Knobelsdorf and Xcel Energy, Minnesota Power, they're building their own. Minnesota Power just built a 15 megawatt out here. BPU just built a 5 megawatt one in the airport. We got another one in Camp Ripley, Minnesota Power owns. The big companies are seeing the picture. Minnesota Power just got approved for 300 megawatts of more solar by the PUC, Public Utilities Commission. So it is happening. And that is a good question. It's not a smart-ass question.
I said,
although you're kind of I won't say.
And I didn't get a chance to look at your numbers. I'd love to have a chance to look at these in a little greater detail. But did I see that there was there a 60-year duration at the bottom or a 60-year?
Oh, 30.
Oh, 30 years.
Is the
Okay, and that's your
guarantee on the
proposed. That's your
product.
proposed lifespan of the product, also.
No.
What is that?
It'll probably last for 50 years or more, like they have in outer space. Solar panels have been on the satellites for over 50 years that are still working. I've had them up, maybe the ecodomes out east of town in South Long Lake. We put solar panels up there in the mid-90s, and they're still producing fine. I've had my own solar panels since 1984, and they're still producing well. So 30 years is the guarantee. They're guaranteed to produce a certain amount of electricity for 30 years, or they'll either give you money back or give you more panels. So that's from the manufacturer. We use, some of the very best. There's over 200 manufacturers in the world now. And Jinko from the USA, they're being made in 3 places here. They were Chinese, but they came over here and built 3 factories in the US now. And so they're the world's leader at about $400 billion. So I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Andrew, for me? So I'm completely not against having solar panels on that beautiful pavilion you guys built down there, and if it can be used for educational purposes. I think when this first was brought to us, we had some concern that we're not sure we want to be on the hook for the maintenance of this,
Sure.
storm damage or something, and it's covered under
You'll have
insurance
to have
is one thing,
insurance,
but
yeah.
having to maintain.
Insurance is a big deal.
I
and
think that was our biggest concern, was the maintenance aspect of it.
I think about $50 a year should cover the insurance on this size of an array.
Is that on your sheet, the insurance?
No, there are some details that are not on the sheet here because we'd have to have too many columns. I made a simple sheet, but they're calculated into the cash flow, into that first column G.
Got it.
So also the depreciation, or what we call degradation of the panels, is in there. So we have about $150 a year worth of expenses on the solar panels for an electrician to come out there and look at, simple, there's one, 2 breakers. So it's not a big deal.
Okay.
So,
My other question is, so if the roof fails on the pavilion, I'm assuming then, I'm just trying to play devil in the details
Yeah.
here, that's gonna be more costly to have to replace the roof and/or the solar panels. You have to remove all the solar panels. I'm sure contractors are gonna come in and say, well, it's gonna cost this much more because you have solar panels on it. I'm only saying that because
I'm really glad you brought that up
we've
because
replaced
that
lots
gives
of
me a
roofs.
chance to tell you another benefit of solar. What wrecks the shingles mostly?
Yeah, so.
What wrecks the shingles?
Hail and sun and.
Yeah, sun is the biggest thing that wrecks they curl up and break up and get brittle. So when you have a shield of armor, solar panels over the top of the roof, and we only have a tiny little space around the edge that's not covered with solar, that roof's gonna last probably twice as long or more. So it doesn't cost very much. It would take about 4 guys 1 day to take down the panels. Maybe not even 4 guys, but you know how city workers are. Anyhow, it wouldn't take much to do the disassembly and putting back up. We do that on a regular basis for our customers. And I've been in the solar business 35 years, so I've seen a lot of rooftops.
Thank you.
And so I don't mean to be a smart ass. I got to run pretty soon, so is there any other questions?
I have no questions for you.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead with it? You want us to give you the solar project?
You've seen how this goes. We might not know until 7 o'clock
Okay.
tonight.
Well, there's no rush, because this is a design for a 2024 project. That's what the grants are being written for. But we do need to know, I believe it's by October 30th, we have to have the grant applications in. So we don't want to do that unless the city agrees.
Maybe you could update that form and just include, like the insurance. And then also you mentioned something about us having to spend $5,000 or whatever that was about plugins. So
Yeah,
it might,
that's a separate
yeah, oh, I thought it
matter.
was like 5.
3,100.
But yeah, in order to use it, you said, so I mean, just thinking like everything we would need, all of the pieces we would need to know to make the decision.
Sure, I'll do I'll do a summary, and then I'll make the spreadsheet more complicated for you.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want additional discussion, Jesse, or maybe we bring this back to the next meeting once we can look at the spreadsheet?
I can bring this back to the next
I think I
meeting
have
if that's what the park board would
a
like.
discussion item that might be
Shameless
pertinent.
plug for our company, winkelmansolar.com. You can go there and look at a lot of solar projects that have been done in the area here. So,
Drive, sir.
Your thumb drive.
oh, thank you.
Good catch, Brian.
Handy things.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is getting long. I'll try to be brief here, but I can tell you that I work on a lot of projects that do have solar aspects, especially on the residential side. And I can tell you that many of those that I've sat in or worked on with clients, we cannot get those to money flow. So I think before I would be comfortable moving forward with this, I would want an outside party to really run the math, really give us some good hard numbers here that isn't the party that is selling these to us, and get a much better grasp on that. I know there are institutions that do that or companies that do that. That's just my thought here, is I just want a second opinion on whether or not this math is actually going to play out in real life. Because I know in some cases, just because you're putting it back in the grid doesn't necessarily mean you get paid for what you're getting put it back in the grid. But somebody way smarter than me probably could shed some light on that. But I would like a second opinion on the math, other than the vendor. That's all.
Dave.
Yeah, my only comment from the city side of things is that this has to be looked at holistically as well. If we're going to be talking about tax credits and that sort of thing, we currently just put a 40-acre solar array at the airport. So I don't know what that means in terms of tax credits. I have no idea of any of that knowledge, but it's not something that just the park board can be discussing if we're talking solar. You know, now we're looking at an entire picture that is much bigger than that, so.
Are there certain other groups we should work with to bring this together? Is this kind of a staff can?
I think staff can find that information. I think essentially just reaching out to BPU to see what the scenario would be with that. Because I would assume that any electricity coming in would be a BPU scenario. So I think we would just need to connect with them and see what that means in terms of tax credits or anything along those lines.
That's kind of what they indicated, is the tax credits would only be if we were the owner. And that's kind of what I implied here is, I know the park board was pretty clear that we really didn't want to own that or maintain it or any of that, but understanding that that tax credit is, because I don't believe Rotary is that kind of a type of nonprofit that's eligible, we have to be listed as the owner of the project. So that's kind of what this intent of the agenda item was tonight was, does the park board want to entertain moving this process forward and starting to develop an agreement with Rotary to install those panels? Because ultimately, to take advantage of those tax credits, we would have to be listed as the owner. Do we want to enter into an agreement with Rotary Park or the Rotary Club regarding solar panels and then their installation and what that looks like long term? I listed in here a few things that we could potentially include in that agreement, but again, I don't necessarily want to continue down the path if Park Board is not interested in taking ownership of those at any level.
John, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of what we were hoping when it came to working with outside, like the JCs and the Rotary, like trying to make improvements to our parks, coming into some form of an agreement with these outside organizations to help us fund some of these and handle the maintenance. So as long as it makes sense, and we're not the ones taking care of it, yeah, we own it, but strictly for tax credit purposes. But if the upkeeps and removal is still on the organization contractually, then I don't have any issue, even if the math doesn't work, right? I mean, even if we're not coming out ahead 60 grand, as long as they're footing the bill for, putting them on and the maintenance and all of that is taken care of over a specific time frame, I don't see any reason. I think that's the direction we kind of wanted to take with the upkeep of our parks in general, so.
But I think minimum, there's at least a $9,000
Gap.
city responsibility here that would be ours.
If the agenda item says that they'd prepay for our portion of it, right?
That's just one of the ideas I have for that agreement, is maybe that is something that we require the Rotary Club to provide to the city.
That's not what I heard from him. He was saying the city's on the hook for this much, and then if you want wiring this much, and if, so.
And
Again, that could be something that we would lie out in an agreement, and I can't say if the Rotary Club would be interested in that agreement either, but that's why I'm looking for park board direction, is if the park board wants to enter into an agreement like that, we can start crafting one. But I know that the discussion was that park board did not want to invest funds into this.
yeah, we don't want to contribute any of the city's assets into new items. I mean, if the Rotary Club wants to foot the bill for this, I mean, that's definitely a discussion we could have, but I don't think we want to spend any more money on new structures or items within our park system at this point in time.
Yeah, and to add to that, we would need to know what does the future look like? So what happens in 50 years? I mean, I don't know if we can make a contract for 50 years, but when they need to be replaced, or, what happens next? Because then the next park board, they're going to be stuck with solar panels or something. Like, we just need to know the future plans as well with that contract. But yeah, I don't have any interest in spending any of the city's money on this either.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard for us to meet with the council on Monday and say, listen, we need to work together to fund all of this. And oh, by the way, can we have $10,000 for solar panels?
You're going to get it back in 60 years.
Like, conceptually, I love
30
it.
years.
Right? I think solar energy is great. It adds an amenity to this building. We could put cameras up there more easily. that's all great, but it's just unfortunately not a great time for us to be trying to improve things when we're struggling to maintain it. So, yeah.
Is the park board willing to entertain crafting an agreement with Rotary Club or not?
I think if
Try.
they're willing to cover
All of it.
all of those expenses, yes,
And long-term maintenance.
Yep.
yes.
Thank
All
you.
we can do is ask, right?
No.
Good, thank you.
What will surely be a quick topic, Gregory Park parking and gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we finished up the walkways, tree planting, boulder placement, topsoil and seeding, although we'll probably have to reseed it again on the west end of Gregory. One thing that was a follow-up from last fall, we did order and place carts in the kitchenette and the bandstand. So for people that are reserving those facilities, they do have a vehicle to move their materials from their car on the street to those different facilities. So those are there, and we did put out that notification, and Brittany has been also forwarding that information to people that reserve those facilities, that those are there for that purpose. And then we'll just want to clarify today, one of the pieces here on the policy for people that do reserve those facilities on use of the park and what that looks like. One of the other pieces that the park board asked us to do was provide some options on gates. So we did provide in here a couple different options, kind of more of a decorative iron, generally about 5 to 6 feet tall. It's 6 in the middle, 5, 6. There's obviously different options. We can get it in any kind of form, but more of a decorative iron gate option versus more of a standard steel gate. We do have these pictured steel gates on hand, so the cost would be a much more limited cost. Obviously, the decorative iron gate, we would have to order all new. The standard steel gate, you're talking about minimal concrete footings, posts, just some miscellaneous materials that we would need to purchase to go with that. But generally, a much more cost-efficient measure. Likely would probably do some painting to dress it up other than that yellow. But that would be a little bit more of a less aesthetic, but much more cost-efficient option. So really what we're looking for is two directions. One of the two options on gates, if the park board wants to put a gate, we were thinking between the two walkways, the two new walkways at the west end of the practice court. In which option that the park board would want to go if they wanted to go with that. We're recommending that option 2, that standard steel gate. And then also clarification on the policy for people that reserve the facilities in the park, that now that we have those carts in place, there is no vehicle access for them to use the park or even the practice courts, as was previously implied, and that includes for the center's band performances at the bandstand, that they would be directed to use those carts.
Thanks, Jesse. Questions about either of the questions in front of us?
Would there be 2 of the gate option 2, like this?
Likely just one because of the space. How wide are they? About 6 or 8 feet?
The prefab ones that we already have,
Those look like they're about 10.
we can cut them down by, I want to say they're closer to 12 feet.
But based upon where the boulders are right now and that, there's only really one cart path in there, so I think one gate would probably get it if they're placed correctly with the boulders.
Plus, it's a lot easier to open one gate.
Correct.
But how are you really opening that? Like, is it going to be locked then? I feel like normally they're like locked together.
Seen Troy's crew, they'll just ram it with their truck.
No, they'll drive in off the corner.
That's what I'm imagining though, is like, not you guys specifically, but I mean, can you just like slowly drive into it and it moves?
No, we
No.
would probably lock it.
It's what?
We would lock it with like a latch off of one of the poles.
Okay, so there'd be like this and then there'd be a pole? Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Let's maybe focus on the gate first then. I like the cheap gate.
I do too. This is exactly what we took out. So I think we can say that we have done our best to try all of the other options. And I think we're going to ultimately maybe land right back where we started after all of this. But my leaning is, yes, to put the gate back in. I just want to be clear that everyone knows that really we're putting this gate back in to keep cars out, but staff will be using the gate to get back through. We're building this for them, but to keep cars out. The cars, I'm just speak here, I live right there. So the cars in the park has dramatically cut down with what we did with the boulders and the grass. It has definitely cut down. They're still in there from time to time, but it has definitely made a difference. Not quite to the point of where I think you could get by without a gate, because I'm still seeing maybe a couple in there a week, but it's definitely helped. And to me, the easy, smaller, simpler option is just a single down towards the bottom on just the gate topic alone.
I would make a motion for gate option 2.
Second.
Any discussion on the gate motion?
So just to confirm placement, we'll have one that's like right on the road, and then we will not have another one that's like a smaller one that like leads them to the sidewalk? Do we feel like we need that? No.
I don't
Just
think
from
so.
you guys,
It'll
from
be
like,
in between the tennis court area and kind of the boulder grass area, right? It'll be up in where it was originally way back.
I think my intention was before you even get to the asphalt, in between the two walks.
Correct.
That's
Almost by the curb cut?
Not that far, a little bit further in.
oh, okay.
Kind of behind the water fountain pedestal.
That's where it was before.
Oh, really?
The pole might
we don't
even
think
be
people are
there.
gonna be
The
able to
foundation
drive.
may even still be there. I don't,
No?
we might want to get the GIS up there real quick and just, oh, of course, the GIS isn't going to have our new work, so never mind.
I guess I trust what you guys are talking about.
Brent, actually a street view.
Yeah, street view.
Yep. Lucky for us, they just drove.
Helpful. I guess I was imagining closer to the street, so it was clear before you hit the curb cut that, like, I don't get a car length into the park and then say, oh, there's a gate there. It'd just be a couple feet past the curb cut.
The original chain link gate was there. Right off the curb cut.
Is that what I remember?
Yeah, you
Okay.
couldn't pull in. It was it was just a chain with a stop sign on it.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Yep.
Yeah. Simpler times.
So we got a Kiwanis. Or, yeah, Kiwanis. Chain, basically.
You want to go over to the west side, Brent? Yep. Yeah, get a little bit closer to the park then. To your
You had
left.
it right. You were looking right at it.
Right there.
Right there.
straight ahead.
So then where, oh, like,
Almost where that cone is.
So it doesn't show the boulder placement,
where the
but we
cone
did
is.
scatter those through that area in
Yeah,
between the
that's
two
kinda what I was
walks.
thinking, where the cone is right there. So they can't even drive in,
That's my thought.
right? But where are you guys thinking?
You
If
gotta
it's
be
not the
careful
cone?
that you can't open that gate and have it swing out into the road
Correct.
also.
Oh,
So
so-
you can't be so close that if the gate goes the other way, it swings out into the road, so
There's a
I
car
think-
parked there?
I think you have to, and I know you can put a stopper on the gate, cause I've built them, but to not go a certain direction, but if this is gonna swing both ways, you gotta be far enough in that it's not gonna,
So you're thinking by that sign right there?
A little bit further back, you kind of see the water fountain pedestal right behind his cursor.
Uh-huh.
Kind of right next to the asphalt area there, kind of right in front of it, between the two walks.
I mean, I guess, yeah, if you guys think that's the best place, and then if we needed, we can move it or add another gate. I don't know. I mean, because people could, like, 2 cars could probably line up right there, right? If they really wanted to.
Not with the boulders now anymore. If
No?
you-
Okay.
If you're trying to go in around the boulders, you gotta go right through this cone, basically.
Okay.
The concern I'd have about by the curb cut is the potential for somebody taking the sidewalk as an access off to the side.
All right. Okay. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
We got a motion and a second, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep, that was the discussion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, parking policy. So I think just to clarify, we've told the center specifically that they can park on the practice court for their concerts this year. Otherwise,
For loading and unloading only. And then
Yes.
they were to return, correct.
and otherwise, the reservation system says no parking or driving in the park.
So then will the center get a key to open up that gate every week?
So, correct, when people reserve those facilities, they get a key for access. Those carts are going to be stored in those facilities.
Oh, not the cart, sorry. The key for the gate, so that if the
Oh.
center can drive in and no one else can, once we put the gate up? Or will the gate be installed after the music in the park?
I'm not sure how soon it would take us. It might take us a little bit to get the gate installed, but we'll get it installed as soon as we can. If it's going to impact the performances, we'll come up with a solution to be able to get them access.
Do we know what the last date of that is?
But just to clarify, they shouldn't need to open that gate because they won't, if the policy is clarified tonight that there is no vehicle access, that they are to use those carts, they should be using the walkways with the carts and not vehicles.
That's where I'm headed.
The gate is really specifically for maintenance if we need to get through there for most likely winter or other maintenance items, but that gate is not for vehicles from here on in.
Okay.
How does that work for Arts in the Park? Do you just overlook that? for
We came
cars
in-
Parking in there,
We came in from the north side and,
just over the curb?
yeah, we came in from the north side this year. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Currently, at most of the the sidewalks, there is enough to get a vehicle up there. It did add traffic coming from the north side, so we'll want to keep an eye on that. But for next year, we will have access from the southeast corner as well. That's actually being designed with a lower cut. So there should be access from there as well. And then we'll make sure that when we come in with our event application, that we ask for permission to do that.
Jesse, do you know who was in Gregory Park Sunday morning of this last week? Does anyone know? Anyways, huge band set up down there. They made it all the way in. I saw them set up the whole thing. They lugged it in from the road with their own gear, actually. No issues whatsoever. And they had an enormous band set up with music equipment and that down in there. So my leaning is, now that we've got the carts, we just simply adopt a no vehicles in the park policy from here on out. Seems like a no-brainer to me.
I'll second that. Was that your motion?
Yeah, sure. Motion.
Okay.
Look at us being efficient.
Two motions going right now?
Oh, what?
No, we voted on
We already passed the gate.
We're doing them in three, we're breaking it up into three parts.
Okay, yeah, so lost.
So Kevin had a motion to limit all vehicles in the park.
And
Except, yeah,
Except for park staff.
yes. Or,
That's coming up next. I want to talk about that next.
Oh, that's separate?
oh,
next month.
purely for
Special events?
spite. Jokey.
Okay,
No,
so,
it's not spite.
so say it again.
My motion was just for people who are renting or reserving a park, that there's, well, just blanket statement, there's no vehicles allowed inside our parks on the grass. They need to stay in the parking lots.
What about special events?
Special events would be a case-by-case basis, like Arts in the Park or something like that.
Like a trailer pumpkin?
Yeah.
Cool.
Still seconded?
Yep.
Excellent. I think we've done a very poor amendment, but we're going to roll with it. That all makes sense, Brittany? We're kind of flying. Oh, the motion and then the, excellent.
Yep, we're good.
Cool. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Next up, Kevin, you had a.
Just real quickly, this is a comment, it's not a motion of that, but what I would also like to draw attention to is that a huge contributing factor in our parks is the behavior of our own staff with their vehicles in our parks. I've can tell you I have pictures, videos, and so forth of our own staff that literally will drive in between the, Gregory's a perfect example, literally will drive in between the pavilion and the bandstand simply to pick up trash or to park to drop off a picnic table that could be carried 10 feet. It's my opinion, guys, we have to lead by example if we are going to ask the public to basically adhere to the same kind of rules. I get it when you're plowing snow. I get it when you have heavy-duty work to go on in there. But many parks in this state have a zero vehicle in their park policy. They dump trash through rolling dumpsters and those types of things. I get it. So, but the point being is that I think we greatly abuse the ability for our own staff to drive in parks. I will also say that I saw a vehicle parked in the 8-foot piece of grass in between the parking lot at Mills, the parking lot, and the pavilion. The grass is literally 8 feet wide. One of our own staff drove in there and parked on that little piece of grass instead of walking the extra 8 feet to dump trash or to clean bathrooms or whatever it was. I just don't like it. I don't think it's right. I think we need to lead by example as best as we possibly can and try to get our grass to grow back and look nice and to not have the ruts and the dirt and blah, 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 blah. So that's my little rant for the day. Sorry, guys.
I unfortunately have to go.
See ya.
Yes, thank you, Troy. Our last agenda item, additional ADA improvements. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as indicated, we kind of wrapped up the different sidewalk projects, both at Gregory and Kiwanis. We do have some additional dollars left in our budget, the original $50,000. We spent just under $35,000 by our figurings, which leaves roughly about $15,000. So this is something that we discussed earlier this year, that the park board would like us to come back once we knew how much was remaining to discuss a potential fourth ADA improvement that we have with our available dollars. Staff presented a fourth option at Lum Park, but going through the estimate and the numbers from Knife Lake likely would not be able to fit that into the available budget numbers. One option that we came up with would be potentially over in Kiwanis to connect one of the new walks along the east side of the park, connecting into the pavilion, making that one accessible as well, and then finally connecting that to the trail. We would be able to likely fit that under the budget at roughly about $10,000 there, which does give us a little bit of flexibility for us to kind of tidy things up and put things back together. But really looking for direction from the park board on how to spend the remaining $15,000 either at Kiwanis Park or elsewhere.
Questions for Jesse on this?
Do we have to spend the money?
We do not.
Okay.
Generally, the comment that has been received by city council is when funds are allocated for a purpose, they like to see it spent for that purpose. So leaving dollars on the table, I don't think is a positive, but no, we do not have to spend those dollars.
I think this is a nice improvement. It's a busy park.
Which one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Lum one, I think was too expensive.
I don't disagree with you. This actually, if you'll remember, way back when we did our park evaluations, sorry, only two of us did that, but
Two.
that's bad.
Well, Troy was here,
Been there
too.
way too long. This trail that we're actually talking about here was one of the items that was actually Troy Rushmeyer's, one of his hot items regarding that trail that we're exactly looking at here. So if no one has any better ideas, I would second your opinion on, just go ahead and put it on that lower part of Kiwanis.
Would you like to rephrase that in the form of a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the proposed ADA upgrades at Kiwanis Park as described in the agenda item.
I will second that motion.
Is that a spot where we could put that trail that United Way is putting in, or did you guys already decide the location of that? Or could
No,
that-
nothing.
That could kind of connect to the park maybe a little bit too? Because it's going to be like a sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Just an idea, but yeah.
Oh,
I-
yeah, that'd be cool. Give them more options.
But no trees will be taken down in order to put this up.
No, we would avoid the trees.
Yeah, okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We did it. We have the public forum, which we will open here at 6:29 p.m. and observe. Thank goodness no one is on WebEx. No one is physically here 2.5 hours in. We will close the public forum also at 6:29 p.m. Board member reports.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
None for me. Staff reports. Katie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Quick update. Adult sports, summer adult softball is slowly coming to a close. We're starting our playoffs soon. And then we will start our enrollment for fall kickball and softball starting most likely mid to late August. So we'll be getting all that up and ready for registration. Returning teams have priority, and then we open it up for new teams to sign up. The schedule doesn't really change for fall as far as what we offer. I am looking at potentially having some fall pickleball leagues and then just using what we learned this past summer on how to separate some of the skilled players and maybe more of the beginners, so it's a little bit more competitive across the board. There was some interest in doing a fall roller hockey league that would then lead into our pond hockey 4-on-4 leagues. But we would probably look at using the small basketball court at Memorial Park, not the large rink, just so it's easier on staff, so we're not moving those pickleball nets in and out, and I don't know, just for keeping everything at least in good quality till the end of the year. So that's kind of the update there with summer and fall sports. Concession stands, Bain is officially closed for the season. Community Ed finished their baseball last week, and then Buffalo Hills will actually be closing. Their last night will be tonight. And then everything will get moved over to Memorial Park. And then all those concession stands will need to get cleaned. And just wanted to let you guys know, so you're aware, we are in a contract with Viking Coca-Cola. And this year, like at the beginning of the year at Bain, one of the coolers wasn't working. And we've just been waiting on a replacement this entire summer, and we never really got it. So just an FYI that hopefully will be here for next year, because that was a very large inconvenience for us this summer. Special events, the Great Pumpkin Festival is tentatively planned for October 14th. We'll start organizing for that, getting vendors, etc. That'll still take place from 1 to 4 p.m. in Gregory Park. Some miscellaneous things that you should be aware of with us eventually taking down the beach house in Lum Park. I'll need to get all of that stuff out of the beach house that we use for the fishing clinic and put it into cold storage. So that'll be happening this fall. Cold storage, there's a lot of stuff that we have stored there. Baseball, softball equipment, old sport jerseys. In some of our staff meetings, this is very preliminary, but was talking with Jesse on if we can sell some of that equipment in a large garage sale and have it like benefit us in some way, so it's not just sitting there. What the legalities of that is, I know there's public auction that we have to look at. He was looking at kind of like if that's a reality, if maybe that's something we do at the end of summer, like we just have like a volunteer helping us sell that at one of our large, like our end of summer, like volleyball, pickleball, and softball tournament. Maybe we have it there at Memorial Park or something. But just a thought of how we could maybe make some money on all that stuff that's just kind of sitting in there. Also freeing up space for me to put the fishing clinic stuff. I will be registering for the MRPA conference end of September. So that'll be taking place in Plymouth, Minnesota. That's just a networking and how we can get a lot of different ideas and how other departments throughout the state function and some new ideas. And then my last little tidbit is I have been getting some comments from a lot of the pickleball players mentioning Gregory Park, their tennis courts, the older ones, that they say it needs to be resurfaced eventually and that we should maybe look at a design that's similar to East Gull Lakes, where they are using the tennis court net as a barrier, and then they made the actual pickleball courts kind of the same color as the tennis courts. I kind of put, that's actually East Gull Lakes right there. And they have the portable pickleball nets that you can move off to the side. So if they wanted to play tennis in the future, they could still, and then move the portables on. But it would be an awesome, down the road, something to think about as far as if we ever do have to resurface that to make it a pickleball area also. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Just a quick question, Kate. What's the condition of it right now? Is it like they want it resurfaced because they would get more courts, which surely makes sense, or is it like the court is actually in poor shape?
I did ask when we were supposed to have that resurfaced in our capital improvement, but it wasn't until 2040 something. So, I don't know if that was based off of us replacing the new ones or how that was even assessed. But it'd be something to look at.
It's pretty
when we do.
ballparky.
That was his park.
Katie, I'm curious about the biking, the Coke thing.
Yes.
So, could we use this as ammunition? I don't know, that sounds bad. Like, I know we've talked that we are in this contract with them for a long time, needing, and to sell a certain amount of soda each
Bottles,
year.
yeah,
Bottles. The fact that they didn't provide the cooler all year, could we say, oh, okay, that just like cut off a year or 2 years of,
I don't know.
I mean, we've got that's pretty crazy. You guys didn't have a cooler all year. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
were
what
using
you
a
guys-
fridge and like literally putting 5 pops in the fridge and then replacing as we.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I
Not,
mean, that might just, I don't know if you can barter or consider that at all, but it is pretty wild. And if we're trying to figure out a way to reduce our costs and concessions,
right.
that might
Right, and
be
we
an
pay
option.
a lot more due to them giving us an initial donation for being in that contract. It's hard to make money.
Right,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. So maybe we could use that as a way to get out a year sooner or however that works. I don't know, just something to think about.
I could, next park board meeting, I could get a better idea of where we're at with that contract and like the amount of bottles we still need to sell and kind of get an update for you guys. Would that be good?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Sure.
Ready for Jesse? Yep.
Okay, just a few quick updates. Obviously, you have the maintenance report. Troy's here if you have questions regarding the maintenance. Wanted to give you guys some updates on kind of some more capital items. Buster Dog Park Pavilion have been reaching out to vendors on like prefab buildings. Finding that's a little bit more challenging, especially with our design standards on getting what we're looking for, something close. So still working with that. Hopefully, I'm going to have at least a few options to present at the next meeting. Also, as reference to compare, having hopefully a couple vendors price a stick-built version of it as well, just so we can have an apples and apples comparison of prefab versus stick-built and what we can go from there. We do have $30,000 in the capital budget for this year to build and replace that building. So working through that process, a little bit more clunkier with the prefab than I was really hoping for, but we're still working through that with those vendors. Kiwanis maintenance staff, both street and parks, have been helping kind of get things cleaned up there. We still have some more work to be done there with getting that cleaned up, retopsoiled, reseeded. We're obviously very busy maintenance staff, so we haven't gotten right back to it. But it's something that is on our radar to clean that up and get that all squared away. Hopefully, you can get some grass to grow over there. That would be ideal. The ARPA projects, the designs are still in progress. I have not seen an update on that one yet, on where those projects are moving forward with design, but ideally we're hopefully going to have something to present and get ready for bidding this fall. The Memorial Park softball lights replacement, I don't know if I presented this at the last meeting, but the breaker box, we're still having an issue with getting the door on the box. So we cannot replace that until we have the door in hand, because you can't have it just sitting open by code. So August, it was mid-August? August 6th is the latest date we've gotten from them on when that's supposed to get delivered. So, doing our best to keep the lights going. Katie's been kind of fighting it pretty much on a nightly basis and hopefully going to get us through this season. But ideally, we're going to get that breaker box replaced soon so we can start to reap the benefits of the replacements that we've done. And then finally, the State Park Road Account project with the Lum Park Road improvement, as well as the trail that was realigned through the archway and stuff like that. That is advertising currently. We should have a recommendation to the council. I think it's the second meeting in August, so we'll have that bid and likely construction starting sometime after Labor Day.
Cool. Thanks, Jesse. Dave.
I had one thing to add before we leave. So we received some funding from the Brainerd Sports Boosters to get some kids into Mills Stadium with some paintbrushes and get those dugouts painted. So I spent a lot of time of my vacation prepping that so we could get that done for the tournaments we just had. There still is today, and I believe tomorrow as well, VFW is continuing their districts, which are happening and still using that field. But happy to report that we were able to accomplish that goal. So we got 20 kids in there with brushes, and it was a lot of fun. They actually said they had a lot of fun. We had a lot of parents thank us for taking that on. It's just a good lesson. It's a good lesson for them. It's a good lesson for us. And I think it's something that we can build on in the future. We ended up being able to do both dugouts for under $1,000. So, and those are pretty big dugouts. So I think we ended up, in terms of the ability to have something paid for that way, it's a good trade-off. But also, more than anything, I think it's just important to get those kids in there, let them realize that they're the ones using it. And since they're the ones using it, they should learn to, kind of have a little bit of pride and a little bit of skin in the game, if you will. So it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but I'm very happy that we did. So I'll be looking to see if we can't accomplish another task like that in the near future.
Neat. Anyone interested in making
Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.